files back up.
Just say you're live, just so you know.
Yeah, give me just a second here. I'll let you know. I'm sure it's okay if we're a little late by a second or two. Come on, Doc. 5 seconds.
We are live, so.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. My name is Charlene Stevens, and I'm the host for this first breakout session entitled Genuine Conversations on Race and Justice with Police and Prosecutors. It's my pleasure to introduce to you our presenters today. This will be in alphabetical order. First, Mr. Naji Brown. Naji is an artist in residence at Green Acre Bahá'í School in Elliot, Maine. After starting his media company, Mind Liz Thoughts, in 2011, he went on and his play, The Bus Stop, sold out 6 times in New York City in 2018 and 11 times at the Seacoast Repertory Theater in 2020, among his many, many other theatrical accomplishments. We also have with us Helen Butler. Helen has an MFA in Theater Arts from Brandeis University. She is an accomplished performance and fiber artist, working at the intersection of narrative art making and social justice, having created creative interventions for national housing, local juvenile justice agencies, and others to incite possibilities of greater connection and collaboration. Jessica Gaines is a program coordinator at Green Acre Bahá'í School. She's an artist at heart and nutritionist by training. Over the past 20 years, she's offered and coordinated educational programming for all ages. Here at Green Acre, she is at the intersection of several of her loves: conversations about race in America, the arts, concepts found in the teachings of the Baha'i faith, and working with groups of people who want to contribute to the betterment of humanity. Chief Elliot Moya. Chief Moya was born in Brooklyn, New York, and he joined the Elliot Police Department in 2007 as a sworn officer working in patrol, then field training, and later investigations, before being promoted to lieutenant in 2014. He was appointed Elliot's 6th chief of police in 2016. Frank Robinson joined Green Acre as operations manager in 2018. He has traveled worldwide, offering art and service and socioeconomic development projects. In his current role at Green Acre, he has found synthesis and coherence in bringing his capacities to Green Acre's outreach efforts in the media, art, and the empowerment of children and youth, social action, and exploring the nobility of all of humanity. And finally, Robert Shapiro. He is the administrator at Green Acre. He has more than 20 years' experience facilitating seminars, meetings, and workshops on community building throughout New England, both as part of the Baha'i community and for white people challenging racism, moving from talk to action. He also kickstarted Elliot Connects, a community-based collaboration initiative which brings together people and organizations to enrich the well-being and vibrancy of the community. Robert is also an artist by training and calling. So with that, I'd like to let you know that you will be able to ask questions of the panel with the Q&A tab that you'll see on your screen to your right. You can also chat as well amongst yourselves. And with that, we'll turn it over for our first presenter today, Chief Moya. Chief Moya.
Thank you. Again, my name is Elliot Moya, Chief of Police here in Elliot, Maine for the Elliot Police Department. I'd like to say that I am, truly blown away to be a part of this conference. I take great honor in it because it encourages me to believe that what we've started is genuine, which is one of the goals that I set out to accomplish with this. I became the chief in 2016 after having been with the Elliot Police Department for about 10 years. Before that, I spent some time in the military, in the Air Force, and also did some part-time law enforcement in Western Massachusetts before that. In Elliot, Maine, here we are a small town where it's a very nice, safe community, And we are very fortunate to have the Green Acre Center for Learning here in our backyard. And I want to discuss briefly how this partnership came about, because it truly is an essential piece to how these genuine conversations truly started. Shortly after I started my position, two gentlemen walked through my door. We had a casual conversation, and and in my opinion, it was really the start of a great relationship. And one of those people was Robert Shapiro, who you will hear from shortly. The relationship prospered. We were welcome to visit the Green Acre campus often. Every time we went there, we had frequent conversations with the folks that were visiting there. And the talks were often about policing, which made sense because it was, it's what we do here. So we shared experiences, we shared our philosophies. And as we continued to do that and grew more comfortable, we were no longer strangers, and we started to build a friendship and a level of trust. And I say that because I think that's the reason why these conversations that we're having are truly working, in my opinion. So immediately following George Floyd's death, I called Robert and asked to meet with him, really just I wanted to process my feelings about the situation. I was struggling with my emotions about it, my police side, my human side, and I knew I was going to lead in a very challenging time. And I say that because right after that, I started receiving communications accusing my police department and me of racism, with no examples, but only because we wore a badge. For me, it felt like a massive weight on my shoulders for something that I didn't do. It felt accusatory, and honestly, it was hurtful. I try incredibly hard to run an empathetic and caring department, and I take policing in my corner of the earth quite seriously. I believe that the officers that work here are decent human beings, but I wanted to make sure that they had an opportunity to learn and grow and be offered something deeper than whatever media outlet they chose to watch and get their information from. I wanted to make sure that they delved into the topic of social justice in an open-minded and unbiased way. And for some, this may be the first time that they engaged in a conversation about race in a work setting. As we know, Maine is predominantly white, and most of the department staff were born and raised in this area with little exposure to more diverse communities. And we found that their thoughts and beliefs were based on their exposure or lack thereof to more diverse populations. So I wanted to have discussions, and I wanted them to be interactive and authentic, offering more than what we knew the latest state's online training mandate would be. And so I asked for Robert's help over at Green Acre, and I basically said, can we have another conversation that will be as effective as the previous conversations we've had there. And that was truly the starting point of the collaborative work between the Elliot Police and the Green Acre Center for Learning. So with that, thank you for listening to me, and I will pass it to Robert Shapiro.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Chief Moya, and appreciate your sharing a little bit of our shared journey and experience together. When Chief Moya came to us last year at this time, and all of us were feeling the depths of the challenges that, of course, have been going on for hundreds of years in our country. But the particular moments, we were. I was gladdened because we had this relationship and we had begun this talking point. Trusting each other and being able to have deeper conversations. At the same time, we as a team kind of had to step back and say, well, what is it that we could offer to the local police department, right? We're not diversity trainers, we're not anti-racism trainers, we're not anti-bias trainers. So we kind of had to take stock a little bit of what we could really genuinely offer. And what we ended up deciding was that we had experience with engaging in conversation in various ways. So that's something we really could offer. As we knew, we had certain principles that we felt like would be particularly useful. One around the oneness of humanity. And by that, of course, I don't mean necessarily a simple, like we're all one kumbaya kind of view of oneness of humanity, but really the depth of responsibility and the reality that we are all in this together and we have to figure this out together. The other principle that we were drawing from in our conversations was around the nobility of every human person. Instead of seeing each other as the other, but beginning to recognize that within each of us, there was that inherent nobility, and to sort of talk to our higher selves in these conversations. We also had, with our governing institutions, the National Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is, the United States, as well as the Universal House of Justice, the governing council for the Baha'is of the world, we had a series of messages that we felt would be really helpful to draw on. So we incorporated some of those messages, and we jumped into a series of conversations and in intense learning mode. So, we would put together some materials, we'd have our conversations, we'd learn from our conversations, we'd study, we'd go back, and out of that emerged a few themes that we felt like would connect us together, get us all on the same page, and we're really striving in the same direction. So we explored our own inspiration for serving the community, what our vision of a community could be, as well as what our missions were, and combined it all that. I think when you come right down to it, ultimately what we discovered that we were able to create together was an environment. And that environment, which was filled with laughter, which was filled with poignancy, was filled with deep conversation, but was also had a level of trust in it, is ultimately what served us well altogether. Not long after that, we had an opportunity to then expand this to the prosecutors in a neighboring county. Naji Brown, who you'll hear from soon, was in a webinar panel and mentioned a little bit of the conversations we've been having with the Elliot police, and the prosecutors wanted to have similar kinds of conversations. So we jumped in and did a series of conversations with them, but we also brought along Chief Moya and some of the other officers to engage in that, and realized that, as the more folks we brought along to have these conversations, the more effective it would be. It's not just one, it's really as all of us jumping into these conversations that it's going to make a more profound difference. So we had a series of conversations with the prosecutors. We're in the process right now of, in a few weeks, we'll be gathering some of the prosecutors and some of the officers together to do sort of facilitator training of sorts, so that we can then move on to other police departments and other organizations to try and create the same kind of environment. I think this really all does come down to relationship building, and it was the formal conversations, the informal conversations, the working together in various ways that has made such a big difference, and I think built up these relationships. One of the things I've been reflecting about a lot is something that came from one of the messages from the Universal House of Justice, which talked about how racism, they're referring to racism, it says it cannot be rooted out by contest and conflict. It must be supplanted by the establishment of just relationships among individuals, communities, and institutions of society that will uplift all and won't designate anyone as other. And this really seems to be at the kind of the heart of what we've been doing. So we're going to hear a little bit from the whole team here. So now I'm going to go ahead and share with Jessica. Well, she'll share with us her story.
Thanks, Robert. Hey, everybody. It's an honor to be here at this, I think this is the 100-year anniversary of the Race Amity Conference. So this is quite the honor. So as you've heard, Greenacre is a Baha'i center of learning, and the Baha'is of the world do have a international governing body called the Universal House of Justice that Robert mentioned. And so the team here at Greenacre, when we were thinking about working with the police and then later the prosecutors, as Robert said, really what we had to offer was this guidance that we have coming to us from the Universal House of Justice and from the National Spiritual Assembly of the Baha'is of the United States. Well, one of the things that the House of Justice in November wrote to the Baha'is of the world was the following, which I would like to read to you. It's one sentence. It's very powerful to me, and it's challenging to me, actually. It says, "But whether through deeds or words, the merit of your every contribution to social well-being lies first in your resolute commitment to discover that precious point of unity, where contrasting perspectives overlap," and we definitely had contrasting perspectives, "and around which contending peoples can coalesce." So I say this is a challenge for me because I noticed that going into this process, my motivation was, if there was anything that I could do to help protect my Black and brown skinned friends, I wanted to do it. I grew up in a predominantly African American neighborhood where the police didn't come when we needed them, and when they did come, there was serious trouble. So I grew up feeling that the police were bad guys and that they were others. The operating principle of the Baha'i faith is the oneness of humanity. So that means that if I'm going to be effective, I have to think, see, feel, and behave in a way that is in alignment with that oneness. That means if I enter a space thinking that this group of people that I'm working with is the other, that's a barrier. And I realized that I definitely had some of that mentality. In fact, I went into this in a way thinking that the police were the problem, the prosecutors were the problem, and that it was my job to get them to see how they were racist and to get them to want to change. And there may be legitimacy, of course. There's some legitimacy to that. Of course, there is a serious problem in this country and in the world with racism being played out by the hands of those in authority, by those in power, especially police officers. That is absolutely legitimate. But if I'm going into a space where I'm going to be working with people in helping the whole group advance in our understanding, I have to be thinking in terms of how can we be doing this together as one group, not as a us and a them. I had to make a distinction. They weren't the problem. Racism was the problem. That was a very important distinction for me. And in fact, what we really learned is that, and I think, Robert and Chief Moya have touched on this, that and of course the House of Justice touched on it too. The success of this endeavor really did lie in finding those points of unity. And so we began, after many consultations with the Green Acre team going into this, we decided that our strategy would be one of friendship and connection. And I had this, I would almost call it an instinct in me to go in there immediately challenging people, and there's a part of me that feels like, oh gosh, by going into this thinking, okay, how can we find these points of unity, that in a way I might be giving into white fragility. But I think what this is doing is instead finding what works, at least in this context, and laying that foundation of friendship, feeling like we have their best interests at heart. I'm not just here for my Black and brown friends. I am here for them, but I also need to be here for the people in front of me. I have suddenly these 9 police officers in front of me who, it became quickly clear to me, had pure intentions and unintentional and invisible bias, of course, and that needed to be addressed. And this isn't to say that we don't address problematic thoughts or statements, but if we first laid that foundation, which we did, of friendship and connection, that like, hey, we're actually on the same teams and there aren't separate teams. There's one team. We are here together. We're all on this path of advancing our understanding and advancing how we can contribute to humanity. We're at different we're different places on that path. And I can't demand that you meet me where I am at. I need to meet you where you're at. That's my job. So once we had that foundation of connection, friendship, and almost unity established, then now we can address more difficult and challenging conversations without walls going up. Those walls go up and I feel like, oh, how can we make progress with those walls up? So making sure that those walls don't go up, or if they do go up, we have that foundation laid where they can come back down and we can continue to work together and have these conversations that really make a difference. So with that, I will pass it over to Frank Robinson Jr.
Thank you so much, Jessica. And I echo your comments of what an honor it is to be here. Yeah, when we first started, I had a lot of questions in my mind and heart. You know, since we're not diversity and anti-bias trainers, what is exactly we would be offering? And then whatever we felt like we were offering, what would be the methodology by which we would deliver it? Well, what we were offering, as you heard before, was the oneness of humanity, the nobility of all people, and conversation. So the methodology was sharing our personal stories and collective study. But something else crystallized for me that was very powerful as we planned together and as we had sessions. And Jessica kind of alluded to her own transformation and self-reflection. But we really transformed as a group who planned and presented together. We accompanied each other on this journey, and that became very powerful. So I wanted to reflect for a few minutes on this notion of accompaniment. The other thing about accompaniment, it's very organic, right? With accompaniment, based on oneness, based on the inherent nobility of all people, that's something that other people can join in on, and that nucleus can grow and be even more powerful. So I used to have a very myopic and probably narrow view of what accompaniment was. I always thought it was, you're good at something, you take me under your wing, you carry me along. But it became a lot more nuanced in this process. And what I recognized was accompaniment is also this cognitive recognition of other people's skills and what they bring to the table. And if I can embarrass my team for a little bit, I feel like we became somewhat of the Avengers here. With Jessica, she brings such gravitas and power and a passion of social justice matched with spiritual principle and guidance, and together really can push forward any conversation in space. Naji, you'll hear from later, you know, he brings his artistic side. He is able to speak truth to power in a way that is can be heard and can be palpable and not really designate anyone as the other. Robert has the ability to really talk to anyone and make them feel comfortable. And that is a true skill. Elliot, who you heard from, very kind, very loving, but a powerful leader. And then for myself, one of the things I really enjoy doing is really understanding and hearing people's personal stories and listening for what they're offering and bring it to bear to the conversations. So I think that practice and that recognition of what accompaniment means in recognizing the talents of others really bodes well for the undertaking that we did. The second part of accompaniment in my mind was what I'm calling a spiritual and emotional accompaniment. This is heavy and weighty stuff. As Chief Moya said, what started this all was the death of George Floyd, and then Breonna Taylor. And then while we were meeting, you know, in the sessions, Ahmaud Arbery, Rayshard Brooks. So even having the oneness of humanity as your North Star didn't make that any more challenging for us in the group. And so we really had to listen to each other when we were planning. We really had to, we prayed a lot together, and we made sure we took care of each other, even in the sessions. Even that meant some practical steps, like we would have large group settings, and then we would have breakout groups. And we decided that Naji and I should be in a breakout group together just to make sure that we were okay. I remember driving to Green Acre on our first session, and I didn't know the police that well. I didn't know them as Robert knew them. And I remember driving down the driveway, and all the police were there in uniform. And I'm not going to lie, my heart was palpitating. And when we sat under the tent and we started speaking, and Robert welcomed everyone and talked a little bit about Green Acre and why we were here. Jessica shared sort of the institutional angle, and I started to feel that accompaniment that we had, and I settled in as well. And lastly, I wanted to share, and I alluded to this earlier, that accompaniment is organic. And as we had our 3 sessions, and we were able to meet with the Rockingham prosecutors, and we asked the chief to join us in those conversations, and the chief brought other officers along. So again, we had this organic nucleus that was expanding. Now, did the chief know all of our objectives? Did the chief know our curriculum and our quotes? Probably not. But he felt the friendship and the bond that was established in this accompaniment circle. And after 4 sessions with the prosecutors, they've identified 6 or 7 people who would join us in training to meet with other prosecutors, meet with other police stations. So again, this nucleus is growing. So accompaniment allows for relationship building. It allows for coalition building. It allows for relationships and friendships. And those friendships, those people are in institutions that we hope can make lasting and systemic change. I'd like to close with a quote that was an inspiration to me. That which is confirmed is the oneness of humanity. Every soul who serveth this oneness will undoubtedly be assisted and confirmed. So with the oneness as our North Star, with us working for that, even with all the challenges, that is the goal, and that becomes manifest in this circle. So with that, I would like to turn it over to Naji.
Hello. Thank you, Frank. That was very well said. Yes, thank you, everyone, for having me. I'm Naji Brown. I am a playwright, originally from Brooklyn, New York, but I moved to Maine September of 2019, and it's been a incredible 2 years. I'm a church boy, and I grew up in the church, so I'm used to a lot of feedback and hand clapping and stuff like that, and I do not have that today. So please bear with me. But growing up, I grew up in New York, Brooklyn, New York, and I was born in 1991. And I was born into a very unusual situation. My parents were both 16 when they had me, and my father committed a crime which led him to being in prison for most of my childhood. So growing up, the cops, anything with law enforcement was not good. I witnessed my uncles getting arrested. And the perspective that I grew up with is that they were harassed for being on the corner. I knew that anything that I did could land me in prison. The police was not someone that you called. They were not someone someone that you called if you were going through stuff and you needed an issue solved. In fact, if you did call the cops, you were probably frowned upon. I witnessed a police shooting of a Black man at 8 years old, New Year's Eve, going into New Year's. I've been harassed by police officers, which led me feeling very, very angry. I'll share one story. One time I was walking and I was surrounded by 8 officers, and they pulled me over and they searched my body. I just left my parents and I left my house, and they said someone was robbing houses in the area. And if it wasn't for me I was a youth minister at the time, if it wasn't for me having my church ID, I probably would have ended up in the back of the car. So you can imagine with all of these experiences, how having these conversations with the Elliot Police Department probably changed my life. So when, like everyone else, when Robert introduced me to the chief, I was terrified. I didn't know what to expect. And when I heard that we would be having conversations with the police, I'm not gonna lie, I don't think I wanted to do it at first. And it challenged me. One of the things that I grew up with was this principle, and the principle was attitude determines approach, and approach determines success or failure. So if I knew that I wanted to successfully allow these officers to hear me, I needed to change my attitude. And I did not have a positive attitude when it came to law enforcement, but I needed to believe in their capacity to change. I needed to believe in their capacity to hear me. And that was challenging. The feelings that comes up when I see these videos and I don't think a lot of white people understand. Like, it's probably impossible for you to feel what I feel, because when I look at that, I know at any moment that can literally be me, especially in the environment that I grew up in. But this was very, very important for me. I'm sorry, I'm like lost for words right now. And just reflecting on the year. But the relationships that grew out of this were very powerful. First of all, meeting the chief and who he is as a man of color from Brooklyn. I think it's only God that God would place him in the position that he's in, and that he would seek out counsel when it came to training or facilitating conversations with his officers. And that right there was the start of a great relationship, the relationship that him and Robert had. Being there and allowing these officers to hear me and being able to express certain point of views, like a lot of officers didn't understand that there was a Black national anthem, and just sitting there having that conversation and saying, look, there was a Black national anthem, there is a Black national anthem. That's the national anthem I sung in school, and it's been around for over 100 years. And that national anthem is more American than probably the first, because when that national anthem was created, it included everyone. You know, when the first national anthem was created, I would have been a slave. It's very important for them to hear that. And I realized that in moving into New England, that a lot of the people are progressive and they do mean well, but like Jessica said, they constantly deal with their own bias. Why? Because there are no people of color in the area. And if there are people of color in the area, there's a person that's been searching for people of color like Professor X and X-Men, just so we can have some kind of community. They're off to themselves, because as beautiful and lovely this area is, it's also not very welcoming to people of color. So having these conversations are so important. And life-changing. You know, when change is necessary, not to change is destructive. And I'm so glad that Chief Moya saw that there needed to be a change. And I'm so glad that we were able to show up, and I'm so glad that we were able to drop our biases at the door and be able to meet them halfway. Now, am I pro-police or not pro-police? I don't think that matters, but I always grew up with a very, very strong Black consciousness. I grew up around a lot of people who were ex-Black Panthers and Black Israelites and people who were a part of the Nation of Islam. So having that strong Black conscience was always a part of me. And it's hard because, to be honest with you, I can't really tell a lot of people that I'm close to about these conversations because they will not understand. But I've committed my life to having conversations with people who are at least willing to hear, because this is essential to growth. This is essential to the change that we want to see. And I just thank you for allowing me to be here in front of you. I hope I said something that struck a chord with you, and thank you again for having me. And with that, I'll pass it to the chief.
Thanks, Naji. That was powerful. I think I might have gotten a little emotional there at one point. Really great stuff from everyone. You know, Naji said something that really struck me, and I think is what making these conversations genuine. And that's, he said that we're dropping the bias at the door. And that really is so important. If I'm true to my feelings, it's been defeating at times to constantly be accused of being one of the bad ones, simply because I wear a badge. As a minority, being told that I have white privilege and not understanding racism caused me, to feel defensive. And I guess I've challenged myself to manage these feelings and choose to try to educate at that moment now. And it's not always an easy thing to do. But we know that the importance of this work, and take the opportunity, I think, to demonstrate that we, everyone in this Avenger team and the police department, we're part of the solution with every interaction that we have with everyone that we encounter. When these conversations started, I think the officers had worries about saying the wrong thing, that their lack of knowledge and understanding would come across maybe as offensive. And the Green Acre staff really, worked to create an atmosphere where it was safe to ask questions, judgment-free setting that allowed, really everyone's knowledge to grow. And I believe this is also true for the Green Acre staff, because as Naji just did, they were able to candidly express their prior experiences and resulting feelings toward law enforcement. So, the willingness to allow for free talking and taking that questioning approach really resulted in some powerful exchanges. And I think everyone involved, just took away a deeper appreciation for the impact that we can and do have. Did we capture the authenticity I was looking for beyond that online training? Absolutely. What was interesting to see was that most of the officers weren't thinking of race issues regularly. But when forced to, they found that they, again, as Naji said, didn't completely understand. So they defaulted to basic meanings of words and what they saw on social media. So, the takeaways from our discussions on race and systemic racism have truly carried on far beyond our in-person sessions with the Green Acre staff. Those talks are just a starting point for us to be more educated in these topics and challenge ourselves personally and professionally. It's really afforded us with knowledge and comfort and challenging each other in the way we speak and the way we act. We know, these officers have families, and I'm hopeful that, I guess I'll call them teachings or whatever we learn together is being filtered down to their families. So, this truly isn't just about educating the department. This is an opportunity to have a further reach within our community, our families, and break this cycle of closed off thinking and educate those that we touch in our lives. We have to continue these conversations in a way that's not off-putting, inclusive, and just radiates positivity. The Green Acre crew, which Frank has dubbed the Avengers, which I love, have done this really just so remarkably, and I really look forward to continuing on this path. And I think, at this point, I think we're going to watch a video that'll show just a little look into how committed the officers are to continuing down this path as well.
We're focused too much on negativity, and I think if we turned it around and try to work together, I think that's probably what we're getting at. Not a lot of people are seeing the goodness that's out there. So.
We as a community will try and make this world a better place for everybody in it. I'm Sergeant Ron Lund of the Elliot Police Department. I've worked for the department for 4 years. I've been in law enforcement for almost 30 years.
Tim Niehoff. I've been with Elliot for just over 2 years now, and 16 years down in North Berwick. So I'm on to my 18th year. So.
My name is Brian Delaney, and I've been on the job here in Elliot since November of 2008 was when I was hired.
Well, my name is Judy Smith. I've been here at Elliot Police Department for 12 years. I'm the administrative assistant to the chief. Prior to that, I was employed at Sanford Police, and I was their 911 supervisor for 28 years.
One of the best things that I've taken away from our conversations were just the relationships, the ability to, have those tough discussions about race. And, I think we talked about other things, but obviously focusing on race. And, it just gave us different perspectives rather than, just law enforcement only.
I think the neat thing that we've done is actually you get to see different points of view. We all know there's issues and problems in the country, but we all have our own view of it. So it's kind of neat to hear from all sides, so you can have more of an open mind. I think it opened me up a lot more to understanding other people's beliefs and views.
I had preconceived thoughts of everything, and there was no room for me to waver. My thought process was right. What I learned from especially you and Naji, I was making decisions and forming opinions on things going on in the world that I had maybe 1% of the facts of the rest of the world. I wasn't taking into consideration that life here in Maine, where I live, is not the same life in New York City or Baltimore or Miami or San Francisco.
Just learning to understand other people, and it just makes you think, not to be so quick to judge. And then I think, another thing too is we've made some good friends.
That, as well as just the ability to reflect on, our own past and our own history of, next time that we deal with someone of a different race, that we take a second to slow down and maybe process, what they're going through at that time.
I've learned a lot. I've changed my whole way of thinking. Sort of like how we're doing the Ernie and Joe crisis intervention. I'm telling you, I am psyched how it's changing me. And I'm 65, so for you guys all to be able to change me at 65, y'all done a good job.
For instance, Naji told me he was educated in school is so far different from what I was taught when I was in school. And it changed my entire mind on the subject of just the national anthem. That was a very serious one to me. And I walked out of that meeting that day absolutely mind blown that we had two different educational systems teaching two different ways. And I have to say that I probably had that same experience, maybe not as profound, but I've had that same experience on so many different topics talking to you and Naji that it's reformed the way I am and the way I see people, because I guess I was a little narrow-minded to a lot of things, and you guys have definitely broadened me. So
one of our core values here at the Elliot Police Department is empathy. Usually when the police are involved, it's most likely a bad day for somebody. So using the skills that we have and learning from the conversations that we had to, just, apply the laws that we have with fairness, but at the same time, just being empathetic with, what this person might be going through.
Okay, thank you. That was wonderful. We're going to take some questions now. And we have a few questions in our Q&A section here. I'm going to read them and then invite our presenters to address them. The first one, I think, is probably meant for Chief Moya. And the question reads, I live in the Boston area, and the police are a longstanding problem, as can be seen in the newspapers over the past several years. My question, where does the us versus them attitude prevalent in so many police come from? Does it start in the academy? Chief Moya?
That's a great question. And, you know, one that I think we've asked here since we've been having these discussions. And you know, I have to say that the academy is, when you train at the academy, it is very paramilitary. You know, so, you know, at the academy was where someone once said to me, make sure you don't tell anyone you're a cop and tell them you work at the Home Depot. And for me, I always struggled with that, because why should I hide my job and who I am? I want to be proud of being a police officer, and I want to police in a way that I wouldn't have to hide what I do for work. So I don't know what they do at the Boston Police Academy. I do know, I can speak for the Maine Academy. And I think that, you know, there is kind of where that beginning culture starts. You know, of the us and them. But, you know, a lot of that may have started even before. So I think that's where I think right now hiring is really so important, and how we can, you know, look to hiring, you know, officers and you know, try to figure out these issues beforehand. So it could very well be. I think it's going to affect everybody differently. I went through the academy. I don't know that I have an us and them mentality. But it's very easily, you know, it's very easy to say, I'm the officer, that's a criminal. You know, I can absolutely see that. But, you know, again, if you put, you know, you start mixing in like we do here, some empathy, and just realize that we're all human, and let some kindness shine through, then that's where you start breaking that down. But again, I'm just a 8-person department here in you know, in Elliot, Maine. So I hope that kind of answers on some level.
Thank you, Chief. Okay, the next question. I think this one is for anybody at Greenacre. You describe a wonderful process of developing trust by means of conversation and friendship. This took place in a small town, Elliot, Maine. Do you have any suggestions or thoughts on applying this approach in larger urban communities? And that's from Roger Davis. Thank you, Robert.
Well, I can jump in and share a little. I mean, I think that there are particularly unique circumstances to being in a small town, and can't dismiss those. At the same time, it really came from that sort of first human connection that, you know, that we happened to have with Winton and I showed up at the police station and met Chief Moya, and he greeted us with a smile, and we engaged in a conversation right away. So that was the seed of all of the things that have followed. So that's applicable anywhere. You know, if we had tackled this from the outside in and thinking about the system piece of it first, and then tried to get to the human connection part, I don't think we would have gotten as far as we have. So we're tackling it from the relationships first, and then because, you know, all of us are part of an institution, we have an opportunity to do something beyond those personal relationships. But the personal relationships, I think, are the key to getting things started. So again, can't really answer for other possibilities, but that's just my thought.
Thank you, Robert. Does anyone else want to address that? Okay, I guess not. We'll go to the next question. This is from Roger Davis, and this is for Naji. Does your experience with the Elliot police change your feelings among police beyond that small town?
It has. Well, it honestly changed my feelings towards. I mean, moving here has changed my feelings towards white people in general. I'm just gonna be very honest, and not that I was. I mean, I guess we all kind of grow up with our own biases, right? But until I say this, until I moved to this area, the Seacoast, I didn't really experience a lot of the trying parts of white people. White people who were extremely trying to get things right. I mentioned this man all the time when I talk, named Patrick Patterson, who was introduced to me by his children does children classes at Acre, and our conversations and how he was totally committed and to making change happen because he was raising 2 Black children, and so yes, I mean when I went back to New York and for Thanksgiving, and I had to use the restroom. I went to a police officer and I asked him where the restroom was. And I guess that seems like a small thing, but you don't talk to police where I come from. You know, that's not something that you do. So the fact that I was able to do that and to feel secure and and confident in myself, it meant a lot to me. I was able to just walk up to him. And to be honest with you, I've managed because I'm like really involved in the community here. I have a decent relationship with the chief of the Portsmouth Police Department, and so it's not just Elliot for me. It's developing relationships with anybody who is committed to making that change. So to answer your question, Roger, yes, it has changed my feelings. But I don't want you to think that I don't think that stuff needs to be done and that everything is all happy and oneness. Like that's not the type of message that I'm trying to get to. I just know where I am and who I am and how to approach it and how to work towards that change with them. I think there is a lot of work that needs to be done. But yeah, changing my mindset and how I see them and not seeing them as the enemy was very important for me. So I hope I answered your question, Roger. I went around a lot of zigzags and stuff. But thank you.
Thank you so much, Naji. Appreciate it. Our next question is a general one that I'll answer. Is this being recorded? Would love to review and share this with others. So rich, authentic, and powerful. Others need to hear this. Yes, it is being recorded. All of the sessions at the conference are being recorded, and you'll have access to them for some time after the end of the conference. Okay, next question. Can you please give examples of how policing has changed in Elliot as a result of these conversations? And I think we had quite a few examples of that in the video that we showed. Is there anything else? And we have another one about the police department. So let me kind of clump these together for Chief. From Rosalind, she asked, how diverse is the Elliot department? And then were there specific recommendations made to changes in police policy and practice that were implemented out of this effort? And for Chief Moya, would it help our country if the police department would pair a Black and white officer together when they travel on duty, if possible? And then there's more questions for you, Chief. I'll leave it there.
Okay, I made some notes here, so hopefully I can hit these all, but I may need you to help me. So I don't know that these sessions formed any. These weren't policy-making sessions. These were, this is something that I wanted to do to just make sure that the officers were talking about this. Again, we're in Maine. If we were, if the officers were left to just kind of live their lives, I don't know that this would be something that would come to, that we're talking about race and social justice that would come to the forefront. And what they would be exposed to more would be the opposite side, which was, having maybe a negative opinion on protests and things like that. So it would be kind of a narrow-minded look. And my goal here was, let's expand. Let's expand our thoughts. Let's open, why are people protesting? Why are people saying this? We have to be smarter, we have to be researching. We have to be well-rounded. I think policing as a whole needs to dig a little deeper academically. I think it's time, to open books. And now I know we don't, I'm not looking for a raise here, but we don't get paid that much. It's not the best, as far as those types of things, but we really have to work on ourselves. And I think that's really a start to a change. I believe there was another question about pairing a black and white officer. I'd just like to add that the Puerto Rican officer is important too, to throw in that car. I don't know. I don't know if that would work. I think if you force anybody to do anything, there might be some resistance to it. We have to work on ourselves. We have to work on kindness. We have to, there was always that thought that, the police need to look like your community. Well, then I'm the one that doesn't match, because I think what are we, 97% white in Elliot, maybe even in Maine, or very close. So I know this is going to sound cliche, but we just have to look. We have to start looking beyond that and educating and figuring out how to just kind of live together. Doesn't matter who's in the car, it's more, like I said before, more about the empathy, the kindness, and and having some love in your heart. Was there another question that I missed on that group of?
Yes, there was. And that, yeah, but I think you answered it, but I want us to be clear for the participants. The question was, how diverse is the Elliot Maine police force? And I understand you're a police force of 9, and you're the diverse element. Is that true? Do I have that right?
Well, what's really interesting about this is that, since we've had these conversations, Judy, who you saw in the video, will tell you that she's Syrian and very proud of that. So if you ever want to try her rolled cabbage or something like that, she will be very happy to make it. But yes, typically, it's 100%, the white officers. We have a gentleman from Canada, but as we know in one of the sessions where he almost burned from the sun, he is quite white. So yes, I hope that answered it.
Yes, thank you very much, Chief. I'm going to skip down to one so we can give Chief a minute to catch his breath here. This question asks, I serve on the steering committee of our local race amity organization in New York and served on the town subcommittee responding to New York Governor's EO to reform all police departments, or executive order to reform all police departments. I'm looking for ways to use your example to assist our local efforts with police. Would someone from Green Acre like to respond to that one?
I can jump in. I would say that, it's been an interesting thing because, people, as they've heard about this effort, get excited and, for variously good reasons. I think the thing that we can really offer at this point, because we've debated about like, what can we share? what would be useful? I think the only things we can share are the kind of the core principles that we've gone about this with. I feel like that's been the thing that we can really offer, because the circumstances are particular, but the principles around the oneness of humanity, the nobility of every human soul, developing, having genuine conversation and creating an environment where that's possible, along with, developing these friendships and relationships that are real. So I feel like those are the principles that we can offer, the particular methods of, how we put together, particular conversations. Some of that may or may not be useful, but I think the principles I think potentially hold in many different circumstances. I don't know, others on the team might have some.
Well, I think if we're going to, look at reform, this has to go further than, let's start a civilian review board, because we're just using the same answers to the same problems. And it's like, we don't learn. So I don't know who has that new, fresh idea, what that is, but part of that, I think, is to learn about the police department. And I mean, somebody has to be inside the department and see how it works. Get a taste and feel of that culture. It is a very different culture. Is it right? I'm not going to say that. Is it because of, time and seeing? I mean, it's all negativity. Jessica said it, when you call the police, it's usually for trouble, right? I'm hopefully not the police starting the trouble, but it's somebody's worst day or worst part of their day. There's a lot of moral injury that happens to, an officer and an officer's brain. And we need to look, we need to be pouring money into making sure that officers are, again, the right ones for the job and are well. And again, that goes back to me. If we're going to go back to some simple words, kindness, empathy, and love, we gotta pour that into the people that we want to police our streets. And that, I know that's a tall order. That is a very tall order, but I feel pretty passionate about that. When I started police work from the academy, and I guess this goes to the question asked before, did I have a little bit more of a us and them mentality? Yes. I would absolutely say that I did. I was prepared to arrest everybody. And, as I grew, I'd like to say I was raised right. I grew into myself, into who I am. I'm a very different person now. Look at this, look where I am now. I mean, this is a very proud moment for me. And I just think that, it's because where I've wanted to go, both mentally, physically, and where I think, that's a certain place in my life that I am. And how do we get more people to that point, if that makes sense?
There's just one short thing I want to say. I think that, we're all aware that there are two things that, well, there's a lot of things that need to change, but two major things is society and human hearts. And they both have to change. And I think we've been pouring a lot of our efforts into changing policies and forcing things, which is important. But if we don't touch human hearts, it won't really matter. It'll be a Band-Aid. It won't be actually addressing the root cause. And I think that's what we're doing here. I think we are uniting hearts and then moving from there. So I think without addressing that part, we're doing a lot of work that might not stick.
Yeah, if I could also just echo that. I remember listening to Dr. Joy DeGruy-Leary, and she said something fascinating, which was, no matter the policy, if the human heart doesn't change, if the human heart isn't freed from prejudice, then prejudice will find its way. It'll make its way to the surface, regardless of policy. And echoing Jessica, policy is important. There are people working on that and doing that. But I think that on our side, we're trying to cement this notion that we're all inherently noble and we're all inextricably linked and we will rise and fall together. And so I think that that's the difference. And I think when you start at that point, you can have difficult conversations, but not feel like someone else is the other. And just on a very practical level, I think, yeah, sure, at some point we would be able, we could share our materials with people and how we designed our conversations. So just to answer that specific question, if you'd like to look at the things we've developed and are constantly refining, yeah, I'm sure we would be willing to do that.
Thank you. Okay, Helen?
Well, they've answered most of the questions that I had. First of all, I wanted to applaud the group for such personal transformations, because one of my questions was what were the surprises that you had? And I think in each one of your in each one of your stories, you actually gave that sense of, well, we transformed this way. And that was a surprise for me personally. And I don't know if there were any larger surprises that you all had as you were progressing. One of my questions had to do with the initial outreach. You know, it's to actually start with the police department is a pretty high bar to go for. And so part of my question in terms of the initial outreach, say, Robert, you talked about going out into the community with Winton. Did you all contact other organizations within the Elliot community? And if so, has there been any kind of response beyond law enforcement? So that's one of my questions.
Well, I can jump in a little bit. I mean, I think one of the things that I think is really important about this story and this series of experiences is that it goes back 4 or 5 years, right? So, with first meeting Chief Moya with Winton, and we had, these conversations. We actually tried a bunch of different things together. Some of them worked, some of them didn't work. But the relationship developed, right? And conversation developed, and we realized we developed trust, right? So that was the thing that mattered. And in terms of reaching out to other parts of, other folks in Elliot and the neighboring area, we've been doing that a lot, and trying to connect. And the prosecutors were a natural outflow from those kinds of efforts. We, at our last gathering, we actually had a board of, a member of the Board of Selectmen, as well as the community service director, who came and joined the conversation. So I think having said that, I think we're eager to do more and expand that more. And I think that's something that feels like a natural next step.
Thank you very much. We need to go back now. We have a closing video that Frank is going to share with us, and then a very brief wrap up. Frank?
On a personal level, I want the conversation to continue because I just want to self-educate on different cultures, of not only this country but the world. I do like to absorb knowledge of the way other cultures live and the things they do, the things that they hold dear.
To be honest with you, I'm hoping that we can continue to share the message, or expand the conversation to include the communities around us.
I'd like to see it grow into the community. I think the two groups that have met so far, we've kind of come together, and you can see there's a progress, I think, and to see the community get involved, that would be so much better. Expanding, I guess. So we planted the seed, now we just gotta make it grow. Yeah.
I wish we could get together more than what was it, the quarter? I think we do it like every 3 months or whatever. I wish we could do it once a month, because it's a learning process as to how other people feel. It just blows my mind how good you feel when we leave there. Okay? I don't know if that makes sense. And it might not make sense to a lot of other people, and but I do. I feel really good, and I feel like we've accomplished something.
We can share our experiences and our feelings on, these difficult issues, so that other people can also learn and grow from these conversations.
I like the fact that your organization is stepping into our comfort zone and getting to see life on this side of the conversation. And it's not even just the law enforcement side, it's the, I live in Maine, I've lived all my adult life in Maine, and I'm 50 years old. So you get to see a little bit of what it's like for me here, that maybe it will help down the road of knowing how to deal with the next Mainer that seems so narrow-minded and opinionated, that, maybe one time I was that guy, and look how I changed. So it will give hope that maybe someday, that other guy out there or that other girl out there will have that same spark that said, wow, that, you know, I was wrong. So.
I wanted to share one other story that just happened to. I get a call. It's a typical call. Someone's a homeless person laying on a business driveway, and so I get a call. It was probably around midnight. It was a black gentleman, and I walked up to him and I started talking to him. And he got up and he was getting ready to leave. And the owner, I said, because he was more concerned that something was wrong with him, and I got to talking to him and said, no, he's just taking a nap. So. And he said, well, he's perfectly welcome to stay here. So I explained to him. He's like, no, I'll just move. I'm like, let me at least give you a ride down to the next town to Cumberland Farms. And so we did. He accepted that. And I'm like, that's great. And we got down to Cumberland Farms. I'm like, I can't just dump him off here, you know? So I came around to the door to open up the back door. And I think our eyes really met. We had something that just hit, but I looked at him and said, you know what, you stay right here. I'm going to get you into a shelter tonight. Take the extra step to help him. Now, he's been walking from Florida, and I don't know how many bad experiences he had, but I told him, I said, well, we got your room for the night. I said, but first, we're going shopping for food. I brought him into Cumbies and walk around. He's got stuff in his hands. I'm like, you know, you can't get enough in your hand. Grab a basket. He started filling stuff up, things like Spam and the little Debbie snacks. But he was, you know, you could tell he's like thinking ahead. These are my meals. So we got up to register, and I joked that there's a whoopie pie. I'm like, you can't come to Maine without having a whoopie pie. So threw that in a basket too. But it really hit me because for the last year or two with everything, all the negative stuff going on, I was looking towards retirement. You know, I just want to be done. And it kind of gave me that extra push. I'm like, this is why I wanted to do it. I wanted to help, and brought him to up to the homeless shelter in Portsmouth. And there's one thing, there's a quote by Satchel Paige, don't look back, someone might be gaining on you. And it hit me. He was walking down the hallway. He never looked back. And, you know, I just sat there and watched him down the hall. And I'm like, this is it. Don't look back. And he continued on. But I walked away feeling this is what our role is. So I think there's hope out there yet.
Wow. This has just been so encouraging. I want to come out to Elliot, Maine. I want to move there and be part of this. This is just absolutely seeing and feeling the potential that these principles of faith have when put in action. It's just so uplifting. We apologize we weren't able to get to everyone's questions. We had about 5 or 6 more still in the chat that we didn't have an opportunity to get to. However, we have put in the chat follow-up resources for you. So if you're interested in more information about what Greenacre has done or is doing, you have Robert Shapiro's email there. You can email him. And Chief Moya has graciously also given you his email as well, for those of you that had more questions about the police department. Are there any last comments from any of our presenters? We have about 2 or 3 minutes. The chat itself will close in 5 minutes. So copy those email addresses out of there now, folks, so that you have them. And I'll just leave it open. Maybe all the panelists can come on. We can see everyone. And there we go. Everyone's here. And any last closing thoughts or comments from anybody? I'm glad I supported this session. This was just absolutely invigorating. Woo! I'm ready to go. This was great. They're usually, the Avengers, I told, usually aren't this quiet, but.
We all have different skills, so they come out in different
Yes.
ways. But I think the only thing it has been an honor to be part of this conference, especially on the 100th anniversary of Race Amity, and I just want to compliment the whole team. Each of them have made sacrificial efforts. And it's definitely gone beyond the comfort zone of all of us at times, right? And into growth areas. So just thankful for all of you for all of your efforts. I'm just grateful to be part of the team.
Yeah. All right. Well, folks, I just have to make one last comment, even though we're 2 minutes over. And to have someone say, I can't wait to do it again. 4 months or 3 months is too long. Wow. If that doesn't speak for itself, right? And these are folks whom I'm sure have dealt with some uncomfortable conversations, right, in that process. But so I commend you, Chief Moya. It seems like you've really got a stellar force there, and definitely a role model for many others to look at. What a great team you have. What a great force you have there in Elliot, Maine. So thank you, everyone. Please check out the other sessions that are in your schedule for today, and hopefully we'll see you at some of the others.